Hey folks, here we are doing our first flipped vocabulary. This is me, Mrs. Clemens, and our list that we're talking about today is vocab number 4. We're going to use this. You can use it to help you review for the vocab quiz. You can use it to actually complete your vocab assignment. And the big deal with this list is it is talking about the U.S. Constitution. So extremely important words for you to review, not only for the vocab quiz, but also for an upcoming test. All right, so our first word that we're going to talk about here today is the Federalists. The Federalists were the group of people who loved the Constitution, and the prominent ones were our man over here, Alexander Hamilton. Oh, we love you, like a $10 bill. James Madison, who has a lovely hairline, looks like a fun party animal, and John Jay. And these guys, like I said, they believe in the Constitution because they wrote it, and they think the strong national government is awesome. And so they just loved it. You know, they were sitting in a tree, K-A-S-S-I-N-G, the Constitution. All right. So to convince people to ratify the Constitution, they created a series of essays called the Federalist Papers. And so, again, it's our main guys, Hamilton, John Jay, and Madison. And so, yeah, they were talking about why the articles didn't work. They have this whole series of essays that appeared in newspapers that people read and kind of debated about and said, yeah, these are good things. And again, they love the Constitution. That's the main idea. They're persuasive essays. The anti-Federalists, however, are going to be the opposite of the Federalists. They were against the ratification of the Constitution. They're afraid of the Constitution taking away too much power from the people. And so their thing is, they said, we won't agree to this until you add a Bill of Rights. They said, we need to have a Bill of Rights. Hey, what is the Bill of Rights? Well, the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that talk about the rights that we have. And so if you look here at this infographic, I'm going to show it. I'm going to break it down in the next 2 slides if you want to pause and actually see what the 10 amendments are. We're going to talk about them in more depth in class, but as far as our quiz, just need to know there are first 10 amendments that guarantee our rights. And as you can see, here's some of them, here's more of them. All right, so guys, I'm going to just totally blow your mind right here. We have 3 branches of our national government, actually, and our state government as well. We've got the legislative, executive, and judicial. So the legislative branch is the branch that makes the laws. And yeah, there are 2 parts to that. We have in the legislative branch, which is also our Congress, we have the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now in New York State, we have the New York State legislative branch, which is comprised, yes, there's a Senate, but then the other part is the Assembly. And so, yeah, we've got the Congress, and this is where they work at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., or they attempt to work, something along those lines. So we also have the executive branch, and that's the president and the vice president and his or her, maybe one day, cabinet. And so you can see here they work out of the White House for the most part. There are other buildings. Here's the White House. I like how they have red, white, and blue flowers. And they have a bunch of jobs, including appointing judges, appointing ambassadors. Here are all the presidents in sort of a pixelated view. So who is this cabinet? They're appointed, and we're going to talk about exactly how they're appointed. You know, they're suggested by the president, and then they're approved by the Senate, and they act as advisors to the president. So here's our first cabinet. Here's George Washington looking dapper as ever. We have our Secretary of War, which we do not have a Secretary of War anymore. They call it Secretary of Defense, Mr. Knox. We have Alexander Hamilton, who we talked about before, Secretary of Treasury. Thomas Jefferson, who is Secretary of State. And then we have Mr. Randolph, who is the Attorney General back then. So we have all those positions today, except now it's not Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense. This is the cabinet as of 2012. Some of them have changed, and I'm actually going to show you that in the next slide. And so what I have for you guys, just as sort of extra bonus kind of information, is all the different cabinet offices that we have today and who's actually in them and when their term began. So previously, if you look back here, you've got Hillary Clinton, who was very famously our Secretary of State. Now we have John Kerry, and he started in 2013. Now, this is an order of presidential line of succession. So, if something happens to the president, then the vice president becomes president. Well, if something happens to the vice president, then the Speaker of the House becomes president. Well, if something happens to the Speaker of the House, then the President pro tem of the Senate takes over. Then after that, it goes to the cabinet. So this is the order. So if you want to pause and look at that, you could see sort of that obviously the Secretary of State is kind of above the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And it goes all the way down to our most recent one that President Bush added, which is the Secretary of Homeland Security. All right, so our final branch is the Judicial Branch. They include the court system and they interpret the law. And so our highest court in the nation is the Supreme Court, and that's the only court that they actually mention in the Constitution, but obviously we have a bunch more courts. This is our current Supreme Court. They are a handsome group of people. They're very vivacious, and I imagine that they go to discos all the time. They can't help themselves, really. This is the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. I've been there, too. I was very, very happy there. So while we're in our theme of talking about court stuff, let's talk about due process, something that we're all guaranteed under the Bill of Rights, that you have the right to a fair trial, a speedy trial, right to an attorney, all those different things. And just like this little cartoon from Ziggy where his cat and his dog have obviously wrecked the joint, and they do not have the right to a trial by their peers, I think mostly because they're not human. All right, our next word is jurisdiction, and so what this is, the sort of broad definition is talking about a geographic area, which court is going to hear a case in a geographic area, but it's not only in that kind of sphere, it's not just geographic. It can be just overall what kind of court can hear what kind of case. So if we look here, this is the U.S. Court of Appeals and the United States District Courts. And you can see, here's District 1, this just little area, New England, District 2, little area by us. District 3 is pretty small. Obviously, District 8 is big because there are states with lower populations. Same thing with District 9. So you can look at that as the geographic area, just like our county or our state, but it's even more in depth than that. So if we were going to have a case that's going to go to the Supreme Court, most cases don't go automatically to the Supreme Court. They don't have the jurisdiction to hear most of those cases, so the ability to hear most of those cases. So cases will often start in the state district courts, then will be appealed, then go to the state Supreme Court, and then the U.S. Supreme Court, or they'll start in the U.S. district courts, the U.S. Court of Appeal, and then go to the Supreme Court. Now, New York State is a little interesting. Our highest court is not the state Supreme Court. I have our court system here, so, if any of you have gotten a speeding ticket or something, you go to the village court or the city court, and then we've got, New York City courts, and we've got county courts, and then they go up, for appeals to the county, to the Supreme Court, the appellate divisions of the Supreme Court. And our highest court in the state is the Court of Appeals. So, wacky. All right, checks and balances. Hopefully you guys remember that 2 seconds ago I was talking to you about there being 3 branches, the legislative, executive, and judicial. So what our founders said was we do not want too much power to reside in one branch, because then they'll take over everything and it'll be bad. So they have checks and balances to make sure that one branch is not more powerful. So I have this little chart here, and again, you might want to pause it, that basically we talk about, the executive branch, the way they can check the judicial branch is by nominating judges. The judicial branch can declare laws or acts of the executive unconstitutional, whereas the judicial branch can also declare laws unconstitutional. Well, the legislative branch can appoint or reject judicial nominees, and they can override the executive veto. Well, they can veto, and it kind of goes like that. Obviously, we talk more about it in class. One of the checks that we talk about, though, is impeachment. And so basically what it is you're being charged with a crime. It does not mean you are being removed. In fact, we've had 2 presidents who have been impeached in our history, Mr. Andrew Johnson, who was president after Lincoln, and Mr. Bill Clinton, who was president when I was in high school. That's right. Both of them were impeached. Neither were convicted. and neither were removed. So they both served out the rest of their terms. So impeachment just means that you're being brought up on charges. All right, before we could talk about the next couple things, we have to really quickly talk about how a bill becomes a law. Basically, we've got Congress, and a bill can be, for the most part, introduced in either house of Congress. So it can start in the Senate, and then they can have all their committees and do whatever they're going to do with it, and then they will submit it to the House of Representatives, and they have a conference committee where they'll iron out things, because you can't have two different bills going to the president. Again, we'll talk about it more in class. But again, you can have a bill that starts in the House and goes through all their different committees, and then you have the conference committee. In the end, they have to come up with one bill. That bill is then sent to the president, and the president has two options, generally. That they can either sign it, it becomes a law, yay, or they can veto it. So let's talk about what a veto is. Basically, it's when the executive branch, the president, says, no, I don't want that bill to become a law. And so if the bill passes in both houses and the president vetoes it, it's back to the drawing board. It means, hey, they're going to have to either redo it or come up with a new bill or try to override. Now, override is where both houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, they have to now override the president's veto. And to be able to do that, they need more than the regular majority vote of a 51%. They need 2/3 vote in each chamber, so in each House of Congress. And it says here that the Congress has overridden fewer than 10% of all presidential vetoes. So it's pretty uncommon to be able to do that. So that's the only way if a veto happens for a bill to become a law. One of our other checks and balances that we will be talking a whole lot more about is judicial review. It's the power of the Supreme Court to decide whether laws are constitutional. And so basically what happens is a law is made, and the law is made either at the state level, the national level, and so the people, they can, if they want to, they can challenge that law. They could say, oh, I don't think that follows the Constitution, and they can appeal that law. Well, not appeal the law, but they can basically bring the law to court, and it goes up and up and up through those different rungs, and it goes to the Supreme Court, and they say, all right, this is either going to be found constitutional or unconstitutional. Well, that was a really, really quick look at our vocab words. I hope that you go through this and study it and do great in the quiz on Friday. All right, bye.